In the cold landscapes of northern Europe, a name emerged in the 18th century that would forever redefine the art of war: Frederick the Great of Prussia. His kingdom was small compared to the giants surrounding him: Austria, France, and Russia, but through iron discipline, tactical genius, and an army forged into a machine, Frederick turned Prussia into a powerhouse that the world could no longer ignore. This is not just the story of a king, it is the story of how one man and his army of relentless soldiers fought against impossible odds, reshaping European warfare and etching their names in history with blood, steel, and fire. Today, we'll journey into the campaigns of Frederick the Great, through the battles that made his reputation legendary. Frederick II, known as Frederick the Great, was born in 1712 and came to the throne in 1740. His rise to power was marked by immediate ambition. Europe at the time was dominated by the Habsburg monarchy, with Maria Theresa newly seated on the throne of Austria. To Frederick, this was an opportunity. He wasted no time in moving his army into Silesia, sparking the First Silesian War. Here, the Prussian military machine revealed itself to Europe in full force. The soldiers of Frederick were drilled to perfection: every movement, every volley of musket fire, every maneuver executed with mechanical precision. Unlike other armies of the period, which were often clumsy and slow to react, the Prussians could deliver disciplined volleys and shift formations with a speed that left enemies bewildered. At the Battle of Mollwitz in 1741, Frederick experienced firsthand the terror of war and even fled the battlefield at one point, but his army did not falter. Under the command of his generals, the Prussians crushed the Austrians. This moment was crucial. It proved that Frederick's military reforms had forged an army that could stand against larger, more established foes. As historian Christopher Duffy noted in The Army of Frederick the Great, the Prussian infantry had become an instrument of precision, drilled to such perfection that they were capable of standing alone against the best of Europe from this point on. Frederick's campaigns became a test of how long such discipline could overcome overwhelming odds. The Second Silesian War confirmed Prussia's rise. Victories at battles like Hohenfriedberg in 1745 showcased Frederick's tactical brilliance. At Hohenfriedberg, Frederick used his cavalry in devastating fashion, unleashing the Bayreuth Dragoons in one of the most famous charges of the century. Thousands of Austrian soldiers were cut down in minutes, and the enemy lines collapsed. Frederick's ability to time his attacks, to strike with precision when his opponent was most vulnerable, became his trademark. His motto was simple but powerful: audacity, audacity, always audacity. But the true test of Frederick the Great and his army came in the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. This conflict has often been called the First World War, as it stretched across Europe, North America, India, and beyond. For Prussia, it was a fight for survival. Frederick faced a coalition of Austria, France, Russia, and eventually Spain, nearly all the great powers of Europe, aligned to crush his small kingdom. To most, the odds seemed hopeless. Yet Frederick believed that through speed, maneuver, and relentless offense, he could keep his enemies off balance. The 7 Years' War began with Frederick's lightning invasion of Saxony in 1756. He struck quickly, seizing Dresden and neutralizing Saxon forces before Austria or France could react. But the war soon turned into a relentless trial by fire. In 1757, Frederick faced one of his greatest challenges at the Battle of Kolin, where he suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the Austrians. His army was battered, his reputation questioned. Yet Frederick refused to yield. Only months later, he turned disaster into triumph at the Battle of Rossbach. Rossbach, fought on November 5, 1757, was a masterpiece of maneuver warfare. Facing a combined Franco-Imperial army more than twice his size, Frederick used deception and speed to lure his enemies into a trap. As the French and imperial troops marched in long columns, Frederick struck their flank with his cavalry, while his infantry and artillery smashed into their disorganized ranks. In less than 2 hours, Frederick destroyed an army of 42,000 with just 22,000 men, inflicting massive casualties while suffering only a few hundred himself. Historian Dennis Showalter, in The Wars of Frederick the Great, calls Rossbach a tactical symphony conducted by a master who knew exactly when to let loose each instrument. If Rossbach was Frederick's triumph against the French, then the Battle of Leuthen in December 1757 was his masterpiece against Austria. At Leuthen, Frederick faced an Austrian army twice the size of his own, entrenched in strong defensive positions. Most commanders would have hesitated, but Frederick saw opportunity. He executed the oblique order, a tactical formation that allowed him to concentrate his forces on one wing of the enemy while holding back the rest. Marching his troops with flawless discipline, he struck the Austrian left flank with overwhelming force, rolling up their lines like a carpet. In a single day, the Prussians turned certain defeat into total victory, proving once again that superior discipline and maneuver could shatter superior numbers. If you've been captivated so far by the brilliance of Frederick the Great and the thunder of Prussian muskets, make sure to subscribe to Vertex of Time. Here, we bring you the greatest stories of warfare, strategy, and heroism from across the ages. Don't just watch history, experience it. Subscribe now and join us in keeping these stories alive. But Frederick's wars were far from over. The 7 Years' War dragged on, and for every Rossbach or Leuthen, there were bloody setbacks. At Kunersdorf in 1759, Frederick suffered perhaps his darkest day. Facing combined Russian and Austrian armies, he hurled his forces against well-prepared defenses. The battle turned into a massacre. Frederick lost more than half his army and nearly his kingdom. "I have lost everything except my life," he wrote in despair after the battle. Yet even in defeat, Frederick did not surrender. His soldiers, bound by unbreakable discipline and loyalty, regrouped and continued the fight. What saved Prussia was not just Frederick's genius, but also sheer resilience. Year after year, he marched his armies across Europe, fighting enemies on multiple fronts. The Prussians fought like lions, holding off numerically superior enemies who should have crushed them. The so-called Miracle of the House of Brandenburg occurred in 1762 when Empress Elizabeth of Russia died, and her successor, Peter III, an admirer of Frederick, withdrew Russia from the war. The sudden twist of fate allowed Frederick to survive and eventually secure peace. By the end of the 7 Years' War, Prussia had not gained much territory, but it had secured its place as a European great power. Frederick the Great had proven that a small kingdom with discipline, strategy, and audacity could defy giants. His military reforms influenced generations to come. Napoleon himself later declared, "If I had Frederick's army, I would have conquered the world." Frederick's legacy lies not only in the battles he won, but in the standard he set for military professionalism. The Prussian army became a model for modern militaries, its discipline and organization shaping armies across Europe and even influencing the American Revolution. To this day, military historians regard his campaigns as lessons in maneuver, speed, and precision. And so, Frederick the Great and his Prussian army stand as a symbol of resilience, audacity, and brilliance under fire. They remind us that even against overwhelming odds, determination and discipline can carve a path to victory. If this story of Frederick the Great has inspired you, imagine what other untold battles and forgotten heroes are waiting to be discovered. This is just one chapter in the endless saga of history's greatest struggles. Subscribe to Vertex of Time now, and join a community of warriors, dreamers, and thinkers who refuse to let the past be forgotten. Together, we'll march through history, battle by battle, victory by victory. Frederick once said, "He who defends everything defends nothing." So defend what matters, our history, our heritage, and the lessons of those who came before. Click subscribe, and let's keep history alive.